In the middle of a ruined city, Paul frantically searches for supplies. Suddenly, warning sirens begin to blare. Panic sets in as screams echo through the empty streets and clouds of black smoke rise into the sky. Paul runs for his life, ducking into hiding spots whenever necessary, avoiding whatever unseen terror is tearing through the city. Eventually, he escapes the chaos and reaches a secluded house deep in the countryside. Inside, he finds 2 abandoned babies, crying and alone. He gently picks them up and whispers, "It's going to be okay." I promise 15 years later, those 2 babies have grown into strong, capable young men named Thomas and Joseph. They've survived all these years by following one strict daily routine. During daylight, they venture out to gather supplies. But once the sun begins to set, everything changes. Nighttime brings deadly danger, and they must lock down completely to stay alive. As the sky darkens, Joseph hurries to seal every window with heavy wooden boards while calling their loyal dog, Rocco, inside. Paul, now older and hardened by survival, waits outside until he sees Thomas returning. Thomas arrives late, which immediately angers Paul. He scolds Thomas for risking his life, but Thomas explains he was helping their neighbors, the Rose family, on their nearby farm. Paul doesn't care. He warns Thomas that if he's ever late again, he'll be forbidden to leave the house's perimeter. Joseph teases Thomas about getting in trouble, which quickly escalates into a heated argument and then a full-on fight. Paul steps in, separating them, and sternly reminds them, "We are men, not animals." That night after dinner, Paul watches his sons quietly playing chess. Suddenly, Rocco begins scratching at the floor, whining in panic. Paul immediately knows this is a warning sign. Danger is close. He grabs Thomas and they rush to the front door. A loud bang echoes through the house, followed by frantic, horrifying knocks. Something, or some things, are trying to break in. Paul and Thomas push against the door with all their strength to keep it from splintering apart. For several tense moments, the monsters outside pound and claw, filling the air with terrifying screeches. Then, just as suddenly, the noise stops. The creatures retreat, for now. Paul and Thomas breathe heavily, shaken but alive. Hey, what would you do if bloodthirsty creatures hunted you and your family every single night? The movie we're exploring today is Arcadian, an intense Irish post-apocalyptic thriller blending horror, drama, and suspense. It's one of those surprise Nicolas Cage films that keeps you glued to your seat until the very end. So, before we go further, make sure to subscribe, hit the notification bell, and drop a like so you never miss our best recaps. The next morning, tensions are still high. Thomas criticizes Joseph for not helping with the door the previous night, but Joseph calmly explains he wasn't just standing around, he was studying the monster's behavior. He reveals his observation. There were 3 distinct attack phases. The first knock lasted 10 seconds. The second was 20 seconds. The last was only 1 second. Joseph believes the first was merely a test, the second was a real attempt to break in, and the third was just a final display of frustration. When they inspect the door, deep claw marks are etched across the wood. It's clear the door won't survive another night. Determined to reinforce their defenses, Paul and the boys venture out to gather stronger materials. They haul everything back home, and while Thomas cuts the wood, Paul checks on Joseph, who's tinkering away in the workshop. At first, Joseph hides what he's doing, but after some prodding, he finally admits he's been building a car. He's tired of living trapped and afraid. If they had a working vehicle, maybe they could escape this nightmare. The problem is, he hasn't been able to get it running. Paul, impressed by his son's ingenuity, examines the engine and makes a few quick adjustments. To Joseph's surprise, the car roars to life. Excited, Paul takes both boys on a short ride, teaching them how to drive and navigate the dangerous landscape. After an hour, they return home. But there's no time to celebrate. Paul reminds them that the windows still need reinforcement, so he sends Thomas and Joseph to the river to gather more supplies. This sparks another conflict. Thomas is upset because he was supposed to visit the Rose family farm that day, but Paul insists this task is more important. As the brothers drive to the river, Thomas vents his frustration, claiming Paul only brought him along to babysit Joseph. Joseph argues he doesn't need babysitting, and the argument intensifies. When they pass near the Rose farm, Thomas abruptly gets out and tells Joseph to pick him up on the way back. Meanwhile, Paul finishes fortifying the door and heads toward a nearby waterfall to gather his thoughts. While exploring the area, he stumbles upon a strange, dark hole carved into the rocks. It's unsettling, like a hidden lair. Back at the river, Joseph secures himself to the car with a rope before paddling down in an old abandoned boat, searching for useful supplies. Inside a dusty cabinet, he discovers a provocative photo, which catches him off guard for a moment. Then, as he digs deeper, a cloud of tiny insects bursts out of the trash pile. They swarm around him, trying to land on his skin. Panicking, Joseph fights them off and scrambles out of there as fast as he can. At the farm, Thomas helps Charlotte's family with chores, but it's obvious he's really there to see Charlotte, the farmer's daughter. The young couple walks together, enjoying a brief moment of peace. Charlotte shows Thomas a tree tied with a rope. She explains that when she was a little girl, she was only allowed to play outside if she stayed connected to the tree. The rope gave her a little freedom while still keeping her tethered. The two share a laugh and play a game where they guess how the world ended, coming up with wild, imaginative theories. When it's time for Thomas to leave, Charlotte gives him a long, tight hug, hinting at the bond between them. But as the sun begins to set, danger looms once again. Paul returns home, growing anxious when he finds Rocco alone, but neither of his sons are back. Joseph makes it back to the car, but it won't start. Heart pounding, he keeps trying until finally the engine roars to life. Meanwhile, Thomas sprints across the field, racing the setting sun. Suddenly he slips and falls, tumbling into a deep crack in the earth, disappearing into the darkness below. Joseph drives to the meeting spot where he was supposed to pick up his brother, Thomas. But when he arrives, Thomas is nowhere in sight. Thinking his brother may have already headed home, Joseph simply continues on. When he gets back, he tells Paul what happened. Paul's face immediately hardens with worry. He orders Joseph to lock all doors and windows while he grabs Rocco and heads back out to search for Thomas in the darkness. Meanwhile, at the bottom of a deep crack in the ground, Thomas regains consciousness. His body is badly battered, every movement painful. With shaky hands, he flicks open a lighter to see his surroundings. The dim light reveals something horrifying, a long, twisted creature stretching its arm through a hole in the wall. The thing lets out a blood-curdling scream, a sound so sharp and monstrous that Paul and Rocco hear it echoing through the night. Panicked but determined, Thomas grabs a small knife and lunges forward, stabbing the creature's hand. It recoils with a violent hiss and disappears into the hole. Thomas barely has time to breathe before a second creature suddenly drops down from above and grabs his face, crushing his airway. Thomas struggles desperately, clawing at its grip as he begins to lose consciousness. Just then, Paul appears, his timing perfect. With fierce determination, he yanks the creature away and kills it in one swift motion. Breathing heavily, Paul helps his injured son up. While exploring, they discover a narrow tunnel that leads directly to the crack where Thomas fell. It's too dangerous to run through the forest at night, so Paul decides they'll stay in the hole until dawn, blocking the entrance as best they can to keep the creatures out. But their safety doesn't last long. The ground begins to tremble violently, and Paul realizes the horrifying truth. The creatures are now moving underground, trying to trap them by collapsing dirt over the only exit. Rocco barks frantically as dust rains from above. Paul yells at Thomas to get back while he lights a flare and drops it into the widening hole beneath them. The moment the creatures stretch upward to attack, Paul triggers a small explosion to blast them back. But in doing so, he's caught in the blast as well, his body taking the full force of the impact. Back at the house, Joseph sits alone in silence, listening to strange noises outside. His mind races, and then a plan forms. He ties a rope to a chair and positions himself in front of the main door, pretending to be asleep. Moments later, wood scrapes as something outside slowly moves the covering away, revealing a hole in the door. A long black claw snakes inside, creeping toward Joseph, testing if he's truly asleep. He stays perfectly still, heart pounding. Satisfied, the creature pushes further in. That's when Joseph pulls the rope, springing a homemade trap that slams down from above, instantly caging the creature. For the first time, Joseph smiles in triumph. He throws a sheet over the cage, blocking the light, which clearly hurts the monster, then calmly goes to bed. At dawn, Joseph wakes to find Paul and Thomas still missing. Worried, he jumps into the car and drives off to search for them. At that same moment, deep in the crack, Thomas digs furiously through the dirt, uncovering the buried exit. With sheer determination, he frees the opening and drags his badly injured father out. Rocco hears the distant engine of Joseph's car and sprints toward it, barking wildly to lead Joseph to their location. The family reunites quickly, helping Paul into the car and rushing him home. Once inside, they lay Paul on the bed and finally breathe, but their relief doesn't last. As they talk, Thomas notices the covered cage. Curious, he lifts the sheet, and the trapped creature goes completely berserk, screeching and thrashing. Startled, Joseph throws the cloth back over it and explains that light hurts the creatures, which is why it reacted so violently. While treating Paul's wounds, Joseph reveals something alarming. The creature had taken only 8 seconds to fully enter the house last night, the fastest time yet. He also believes there was a second creature, one that escaped. Their behavior is changing, evolving. Thomas, frustrated, says it's because they killed several creatures in the hole last night, and now the monsters are retaliating. He recalls Charlotte once telling him that her family almost never saw creatures on their property. But Joseph doesn't believe him. He's convinced only Paul killed those creatures, not Thomas. Determined to prove himself, Thomas grabs an axe and moves to kill the captive monster. Joseph tries to stop him, arguing they need to study it, not destroy it. During their struggle, the creature breaks free, darting under the bed. Rocco barks furiously, alerting them. The monster lunges from its hiding spot, ready to attack. Joseph bravely tackles it, holding it down long enough for Thomas to swing the axe and decapitate it in one brutal strike. Still obsessed with understanding the threat, Joseph drags the body to the workshop and begins cutting it open. Rocco and a swarm of insects gathering around. But no matter how deep he cuts, he can't figure out what these creatures truly are. Thomas interrupts, insisting they take Paul to Charlotte's farm, where there might be medicine and better care. Joseph disagrees, certain the Rose family won't help them, but Thomas forces him to go. When they arrive, Charlotte's parents coldly prove Joseph right. They refuse to take Paul in, claiming they don't have enough medicine or resources for someone so badly injured. Charlotte protests passionately, but no one listens to her. Her parents allow Thomas to stay, but Paul and Joseph must leave. Furious and heartbroken, Joseph storms out. When Thomas chases after him, the two brothers fight violently. Joseph, consumed by rage, blames Thomas for the death he believes is coming to their father. Thomas loses control and pins Joseph to the ground, choking him in anger, until he suddenly realizes what he's doing and stops. Shaken, Joseph shoves Thomas away and drives off with their unconscious father, leaving Thomas behind at the farm. Later, Charlotte comforts Thomas, sharing real food and showing him things he's never seen before, a brief glimpse of what life used to be like before the world ended. The two grow closer and finally kiss, but their moment is shattered when Charlotte's father storms in and orders her to another room. Meanwhile, on the drive home, Joseph notices sheep fleeing in terror and strange mounds of dirt rising all around. His stomach sinks. The creatures are moving underground again. When he arrives home, he spots a dirt trail leading directly to the house's wall. The realization hits him hard. The monsters might already be under the house. He tends to Paul's injuries, then races to the workshop to gather tools and supplies for a new plan. As he secures the windows, he steps on a rug and falls through, revealing a hole beneath the floorboards. His worst fear is confirmed. The creatures have already breached the house. Back at the farm, Thomas sneaks into the kitchen to gather medicine for Paul. Charlotte finds him, worried but helps him anyway. She hands over the medication and Thomas hugs her tightly, promising to return. Unbeknownst to them, someone is secretly listening. As Thomas heads toward the gate, a farm worker confronts him with a gun, accusing him of stealing. Thomas pleads, explaining that Charlotte gave him the medicine, but the worker doesn't believe him. Other employees arrive, and together they drag Thomas to the garage, tying him up. They blast loud music so no one outside will hear what they're about to do. One of the men prepares to shoot Thomas in the legs, but just as he pulls the trigger, the ground beneath him collapses into a hidden hole. The shot goes wild, missing Thomas completely. Everyone freezes in shock, staring into the pit, when a creature bursts out, shrieking. Inside the farmhouse, Charlotte's parents wake to the sound of chaos. Her father grabs a candle and steps into the dark hallway. Suddenly, a creature crashes through the doorway, lunging straight at him. The candle falls, igniting a fire as the monster attacks. It leaps from father to mother, clawing and thrashing violently. The father wrestles it back, yelling for his wife to run. She barely makes it a few steps before another creature pounces on her, dragging her down as the farmhouse descends into hell. The creature begins to shift its form, its body twisting in unnatural ways, and then it vomits all over Charlotte's mother before launching a vicious attack. From her room, Charlotte hears the horrifying sounds of her parents' final screams, then silence. Heart pounding, she slowly steps into the hallway and freezes. A trail of blood streaks across the floor. Trembling, Charlotte follows it, step by step, until she reaches the bathroom, where she's met with a nightmarish sight. The creature, carrying her mother's lifeless body on its back, snarling in triumph. Meanwhile, in the garage, chaos has erupted. The farmhands fight desperately, but they're no match for the swarm. One by one, they're torn apart, their screams drowned out by the screeching monsters. Those who escape are hunted down immediately, while even more creatures burst through the walls, overwhelming them. The garage quickly catches fire, smoke and flames swallowing the room. Tied up and helpless, Thomas kicks wildly, toppling a piece of furniture beside him. He smashes it repeatedly, finally snapping the wood and freeing his hands. Just as a creature lunges at him, Charlotte appears, swinging hard and knocking it down. Together, they sprint out of the burning garage. Thomas looks up and sees the farmhouse ablaze, flames devouring everything. Charlotte, tears streaming down her face, tells him the unthinkable. My parents are gone. With nowhere else to turn, they decide to head back to Thomas's house. Back at home, Joseph is already preparing for war. He shoves furniture into the hole beneath the floorboards, desperately trying to buy time. Then he glances at his unconscious father. Leaning down, he kisses Paul's forehead, a silent promise that he'll protect him no matter what. Suddenly, there's a noise at the door. Joseph whirls around, ready to fight, but it's just Thomas and Charlotte. Relief floods through him for only a moment. He begins to explain that he needs Thomas's help, but before they can speak further, Paul stirs awake. Groggy but determined, Paul takes the medicine Charlotte brought and rasps, "Don't stop fighting, no matter what." His voice reignites their courage. Joseph quickly lays out his plan. They gather every fuel can in the garage while Rocco barks wildly, alerting them to the growing danger beneath the house. They push an old freezer into the living room, a makeshift bunker, then Thomas and Charlotte race to board up every window. Joseph builds a massive pile of furniture, soaking it with fuel and stuffing it with every explosive item he can find. At the very top, he places one of Paul's burning cigarettes, letting it smolder slowly, a ticking time bomb. Suddenly, the furniture covering the hole shakes violently. At that same moment, a creature drops down the chimney into the very room where Paul is lying. Another monster erupts from the hole, barreling toward Thomas. He strikes first, stabbing it in the back, but the creature spins and slashes at him in retaliation. Thomas fights through the pain, yanking the blade free and plunging it into the creature's skull, killing it for good. A third creature charges Charlotte, but she stays calm and shoots it point blank, dropping it instantly. The two of them rush to Joseph's side, shoving the heavy freezer into position, but then the door behind them bursts open. Paul stands there, covered in blood, having just killed the chimney monster with his bare hands. Without hesitation, he grabs Charlotte's pistol and fires into the floor, trying to hit the swarming creatures beneath them. But there are too many. The floor cracks open as a horde of monsters erupts, racing down the hallway straight toward Paul. With a defiant roar, Paul kicks the lead creature, causing a chain reaction. The weight collapses the floor beneath them, and several monsters plummet into the pit. Some still remain, screeching and clawing, but Thomas and Joseph finish them off together, working seamlessly as a team. For the first time, Paul sees his sons fighting side by side, stronger than ever. With the swarm temporarily beaten back, Paul makes a heartbreaking choice. As Joseph, Thomas, Charlotte, and Rocco climb into the freezer, Paul slams the door shut, locking himself outside. "Go!" he shouts. "I'll hold them off!" Inside the freezer, the kids pound on the walls, begging him to come in. But Paul stays behind, memories flooding back of the day he first found the boys as helpless infants, how he promised them everything would be okay. Then the final wave of creatures strikes, and Paul charges them head on. The cigarette burns down to nothing, igniting the massive fuel-soaked pile. Boom! The explosion rips through the house, collapsing it in a fiery inferno as the freezer is blasted free. rolling and tumbling across the ground. For endless minutes, it spins and slides before finally coming to a stop. Inside, silence. Then, a creak. The lid opens. Thomas, Joseph, Charlotte, and Rocco stumble out, coughing and shaking, only to find their home reduced to ash and ruin. Desperately, they search the wreckage for Paul, but instead, a lone creature leaps from the debris, its body ablaze. The group runs, sprinting for the car. The burning monster gives chase, relentless, until Charlotte strikes it with her pistol, knocking it down long enough for them to speed away. As they drive into the night, the creature follows behind on fire, shrieking into the darkness until it finally collapses. The car slows. For the first time in their lives, the group looks up to see a clear, star-filled sky, a sight they'd never known existed because they'd always been trapped inside at night. By morning, they return to the ruins of their home. But instead of rebuilding, they decide to leave the past behind. They gather whatever supplies remain, bury their loved ones, and take a final silent moment to say goodbye. Then Joseph, Thomas, Charlotte, and Rocco climb into the car and drive away, searching for a new home, new people, and maybe a new future. And that's how this gripping story ends, with heartbreak, survival, and a sliver of hope. What grade would you give this movie? If you enjoyed this recap, hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss the next wild story. Until next time, stay safe and watch the shadows.